Imagine a place where police patrol the streets in multi-million-dollar Lamborghinis, where gold is dispensed from ATMs as easily as cash, and where steel skyscrapers pierce the clouds like shimmering needles rising from the dust. For most of the world, looking at Dubai triggers a single, reflexive thought. They're just lucky. They hit the oil jackpot, and anyone could build a paradise if they just kept digging for money. But that assumption is not just oversimplified. It's fundamentally wrong. The cold, hard truth is this. If Dubai had relied solely on its oil, it would likely have vanished from the global economic map decades ago, or worse, become a hollowed-out ghost town reclaimed by the shifting sands. While its neighbors like Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia swim in seemingly bottomless oceans of crude, Dubai's oil reserves were always more of a shallow puddle, evaporating rapidly under the 50-degree Celsius sun. Welcome to the most thrilling economic deconstruction of the 21st century. Today, we aren't looking at dry financial spreadsheets. We are pulling back the curtain on one of the most brilliant survival strategies in human history. This is the story of how a small tribal settlement transformed a consolation prize lottery ticket into a global financial empire. We're going to explore why their path to wealth was radically different from what you've been told. To understand the future of this shimmering metropolis, we must first go back to a time before the Ferraris, back when the only thing abundant in Dubai was desperation. Before the black gold, before the man-made Palm Islands, Dubai was nothing more than a humble fishing and pearl diving village on the edge of the Persian Gulf. Life here wasn't a luxury vacation. It was a brutal, daily struggle for survival. There was no infrastructure, no industry, and the entire population's survival rested on the shoulders of divers who plunged into the salty depths to find natural pearls. Then, tragedy struck. In the 1930s, the Great Depression collided with the invention of cultured pearls in Japan, completely obliterating Dubai's economy overnight. Suddenly, their most precious resource was worthless. People starved, and tribes began to scatter. This was the first pain point in their history, and it burned a permanent lesson into the minds of Dubai's leadership. Never, ever rely on a single resource that you cannot control. Fast forward to 1966. Fate finally smiled, but it was a cynical grin. Oil was discovered at the Fateh field. However, instead of pure celebration, Sheikh Rashid bin Saeed Al Maktoum, the architect of modern Dubai, saw a terrifying reality. Dubai's reserves were microscopic, barely a tenth of what Abu Dhabi possessed. He knew that if they spent this money like new money socialites, they would be bankrupt within 2 decades. Sheikh Rashid famously remarked, "My grandfather rode a camel. My father rode a camel. I drive a Land Rover. My son drives a Mercedes. His son will drive a Mercedes, but his son will ride a camel." He understood that oil was merely a temporary booster, a foreign bloodline that needed to be injected into the economy's internal organs before the flow stopped. Instead of building a total welfare state like Brunei, Dubai chose a path of extreme risk, using every single cent of oil revenue to build an infrastructure that far exceeded their current needs. They didn't just sell oil. They used oil to sell a vision to the rest of the world. This was the birth of the global funnel strategy. The moment Dubai decided that if they couldn't have the oil, they would have the flow of people, the flow of goods, and the flow of capital. If oil was the spark that lit the fire, then infrastructure was the massive engine Dubai's leadership built to keep that fire burning long after the fuel ran out. To understand how a desert port became a global titan, we have to look at a decision that many at the time called a white elephant, a project so massive and so expensive that it seemed destined for failure. This wasn't just a construction project. It was a high-stakes geopolitical gamble that redefined the rules of international trade. The logic was simple, yet terrifyingly ambitious. If you don't have enough oil to power the world, you must become the place the world uses to move everything else. Sheikh Rashid realized that the world's trade routes were shifting, and Dubai sat at the perfect crossroads between the East and the West. But there was a problem. The existing Dubai Creek was too shallow for the giant container ships that were beginning to dominate the oceans. Most leaders would have played it safe, dredging a bit deeper or building a modest pier. Instead, Dubai decided to build Jebel Ali, the largest man-made harbor in human history. At the time, the site of Jebel Ali was nothing but a desolate stretch of sand 35 kilometers outside the city center. Critics and international observers were baffled. They asked, who will come to a port in the middle of nowhere? Why build something so vast when there is no industry to support it? It was a classic field of dreams strategy. Build it, and they will come. But in the world of global economics, hope is not a strategy. Dubai needed a magnet, a reason for the world's corporations to ignore the established ports of the region and move their operations to this patch of desert. The solution was a masterstroke of legal and economic engineering, the creation of the Jebel Ali Free Zone, or JAFZA. This was a radical departure from the traditional economic models of the Middle East. For the first time, foreign companies were allowed 100% ownership of their businesses, zero corporate taxes, and the freedom to repatriate all their profits. They essentially created a sovereign bubble where global capital could play by its own rules, insulated from the complexities of local bureaucracy. The result was an explosion of activity. Jebel Ali didn't just become a port. It became a global logistics hub where goods were manufactured, stored, and redistributed to every corner of the globe. By removing the friction of taxes and ownership restrictions, Dubai turned itself into a giant switchboard for the world's economy. This was the moment the rentier state model began to die, replaced by a merchant state model. But we must remain neutral in our analysis. This success wasn't guaranteed by some divine providence. It was fueled by a staggering amount of debt and a relentless pressure on the labor force, much of which was imported from South Asia. The rapid expansion of Jebel Ali created a dual-class society, the visionary planners at the top and the vast army of migrant workers who actually laid the concrete in the blistering heat. This tension between high-tech luxury and low-wage labor is the shadow that follows Dubai's brilliance, a structural reality that continues to define its existence today. As Jebel Ali began to pump billions into the treasury, the leadership realized that being a gateway for ships wasn't enough. They wanted the sky. If the sea was Dubai's first gateway to the world, the sky would become its ultimate fortress. To truly understand how this city-state bypassed the traditional stages of economic development, you have to look at a decision made in the mid-1980s that seemed like a suicide mission to most aviation experts. At that time, the regional airline market was dominated by Gulf Air, a powerful carrier owned by several neighboring states. Dubai was merely a junior partner, and when they asked for more flights to serve their growing city, they were flatly refused. Most leaders would have retreated. Dubai, instead, decided to build its own airline from scratch with just 2 leased aircraft and $10 million in seed money. This was the birth of Emirates. But building an airline in the desert wasn't just about pride. It was a calculated play on a massive geographic advantage. Dubai realized something that the rest of the world had overlooked. They were located within an 8-hour flight of 2/3 of the human population. They weren't just a destination. They were the Earth's center of gravity. This realization birthed the long-haul to long-haul model. They didn't want you to just visit Dubai. They wanted to become the mandatory stopover for anyone traveling from London to Sydney or New York to Mumbai. To make this work, Dubai implemented a radical open skies policy. While most countries protect their national carriers by limiting foreign competition, Dubai invited everyone to land at their airport. It was a brutal Darwinian strategy. If Emirates couldn't survive the competition, it didn't deserve to exist. This forced the airline to become the most efficient and luxurious in the world, turning a grueling 15-hour flight into a high-end experience. By the time the world realized what was happening, Dubai International Airport had overtaken London Heathrow as the world's busiest hub for international passengers. However, we must examine this through a neutral lens. The meteoric rise of Emirates and Dubai's aviation sector has not been without intense international friction. For years, major carriers in the United States and Europe have accused Dubai of unfair competition. They argue that Emirates benefits from massive government subsidies, a lack of corporate taxes, and the absence of labor unions, creating a playing field that is tilted in the desert's favor. Dubai's defense has always been consistent. They aren't subsidizing. They are simply providing a business-friendly environment that Western bureaucracies have forgotten how to create. Whether you view it as a masterpiece of strategic planning or a product of state-sponsored capitalism, the result is undeniable. Aviation now accounts for nearly 27% of Dubai's GDP. They successfully turned the emptiness of the sky into a multi-billion-dollar asset. But as millions of people began pouring through the airport terminals, the leadership realized they had a new problem. These people were just passing through. They weren't staying. To turn transit passengers into residents and investors, Dubai would have to perform its most audacious trick yet, turning the actual sand of the desert into the world's most expensive real estate. By the early 2000s, Dubai had successfully built the pipes, the world-class port, and the global airline hub. But pipes are only as valuable as what flows through them. The leadership realized that to truly delink their fate from oil, they needed to stop being just a transit point and start being a destination. They needed to convince the world's wealthy elite to not just fly over the desert, but to buy a piece of it. This birthed a strategy we can call the architecture of hype, a masterclass in creating value out of thin air, or more accurately, out of shifting sand. The fundamental problem was scarcity. Dubai has a relatively short coastline, and in the world of luxury real estate, beachfront is the ultimate currency. Instead of accepting the limitations of geography, Dubai decided to rewrite it. They launched the Palm Jumeirah project, a massive, man-made archipelago in the shape of a palm tree. This wasn't just an engineering feat, it was a psychological anchor. By building the palm, Dubai effectively doubled its beachfront overnight. They didn't just build houses, they built a global landmark that was visible from space, signaling to every investor on the planet that Dubai was no longer a village, it was a titan. But the real genius lay in the financial model, the off-plan system. Dubai pioneered a way to build a city using other people's money. By selling properties before a single grain of sand was moved, they generated the massive liquidity needed to fund these impossible projects. They sold a vision, a rendering, and a lifestyle. Investors from Europe, Asia, and Russia flocked to buy, driven by the fear of missing out on the next great global frontier. This transformed Dubai's economy into a high-velocity real estate machine where the construction crane became the national bird. However, a neutral analysis requires us to look at the cracks in this glittering facade. This rapid growth was built on a mountain of debt and an almost blind faith in perpetual expansion. In 2008, the global financial crisis hit Dubai like a desert storm. Real estate prices plummeted by 50% in a matter of months. Projects were abandoned, and the miracle seemed to be evaporating. The world watched, expecting Dubai to become the ultimate cautionary tale of hubris. Yet, this is where the story takes a complex turn. Dubai didn't collapse. It was stabilized by a $10 billion bailout from its oil-rich neighbor, Abu Dhabi. This moment of extreme vulnerability revealed a core truth. Dubai's independence from oil was still, in many ways, subsidized by the region's broader oil wealth. But rather than retreating, Dubai used the crisis to pivot. They realized that hype alone wasn't enough. They needed density and gravity. They completed the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building, not just as a vanity project, but as a center of gravity to increase the value of every square inch of land surrounding it. They learned that in the desert, if you stop growing, you get buried. This led to their next and perhaps most controversial move, the creation of a global tax haven and a playground for the world's gray capital. If real estate is the bait and aviation is the conduit, then Dubai's financial ecosystem is the golden cage designed to anchor and retain global wealth. To truly understand how this city-state flourished without a sea of oil, we must examine an invisible but incredibly expensive product they are selling: safety. In a world increasingly fractured by trade wars, aggressive sanctions, and tightening financial oversight, Dubai has positioned itself as the Switzerland of the Middle East, a sanctuary where capital can reside with minimal friction and maximum discretion. The heart of this strategy lies in a tax regime that is almost unimaginable by Western standards. Dubai offers 0% personal income tax, 0% capital gains tax, and, until very recently, 0% corporate tax for most sectors. This isn't just a simple economic policy. It is a geopolitical magnet. By removing the burden of taxation, Dubai isn't just attracting the wealthy. It is attracting the very circulatory system of the global economy. Multinational corporations, venture capital funds, and high-net-worth individuals see Dubai as a wealth preservation engine, where profits remain whole rather than being eroded by state bureaucracies. However, a neutral analysis requires us to look beyond the surface of transparency and examine the concept of gray capital. Dubai has been masterfully successful in maintaining a stance of radical political neutrality. They refuse to take sides in global conflicts, whether it's the war in Ukraine, shifts in African leadership, or the movement of capital out of China. This has turned Dubai into a safety valve for funds seeking to escape sanctions or domestic political instability. We see clear evidence of this in the massive influx of capital from Russia and neighboring regions in recent years, flowing directly into Dubai's luxury real estate and financial free zones. To solidify this position, the leadership introduced the Golden Visa program. This was a tactical pivot to transform Dubai from a place people visit into a place where people belong. By granting long-term residency to investors and top-tier talent, Dubai creates a psychological and financial commitment. When a billionaire moves their headquarters here, they bring more than just money. They bring their networks, their intellectual capital, and a vested interest in the city's stability. But this power comes with a significant cost to international reputation. Dubai's open-door policy for capital has frequently drawn the scrutiny of global watchdogs like the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, which at times has placed the emirate on its gray list due to concerns over money laundering and terror financing. Dubai stands on a razor's edge. How to remain a magnet for global flows without becoming a pariah in the international financial system. Their response has been a delicate dance of tightening regulations just enough to satisfy global standards, while keeping the environment flexible enough to avoid cooling the investment fever. Dubai is not just a city. It is a high-stakes financial algorithm designed to solve the problem of survival in a volatile world. They understand that in this era, whoever controls the flow of capital controls the future. But as this wealth is built on a foundation of neutrality and secrecy, the ultimate question remains: can it survive the growing global pressure for total transparency? The answer lies in their next move, where they are quietly preparing for a game even larger than finance: the race for artificial intelligence and the digital frontier. If the 20th century was defined by who controlled the land and the sea, the 21st century is defined by who controls the data and the code. Dubai's leadership understands that even the most luxurious real estate can depreciate, and even the busiest ports can be bypassed by new trade routes. To ensure their survival for the next century, they have launched an audacious transition, moving from a brick-and-mortar economy to a knowledge and silicon economy. This is the era of Dubai's Vision 2071, a centennial plan designed to make the emirate the most advanced nation on Earth by its 100th anniversary. The centerpiece of this strategy is the massive investment in artificial intelligence. Dubai was the first city in the world to appoint a Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence. This wasn't just a PR move. It was a signal to the global tech community that Dubai was ready to become the world's living laboratory. While Western nations are bogged down by complex regulatory hurdles and ethical debates, Dubai offers a regulatory sandbox, a place where tech giants and startups can test autonomous vehicles, drone delivery systems, and blockchain-based government services in real time. They aren't just buying technology, they are attempting to host the very evolution of it. However, we must analyze this transition with a critical, neutral eye. Transitioning from a service and construction-based economy to a high-tech hub requires more than just capital. It requires a deep, indigenous talent pool. Currently, Dubai remains heavily dependent on imported brainpower. The vast majority of its tech sector is powered by expatriates from Silicon Valley, India, and Europe. This creates a structural vulnerability. If the global talent pool decides to move elsewhere, the digital mirage could evaporate. To counter this, Dubai has shifted its visa strategy again, offering long-term residency to coders and scientists, effectively trying to buy the permanence of a tech ecosystem. We also see a fascinating and somewhat controversial push into the digital economy of the future, including the metaverse and virtual assets. Dubai has established VARA, the Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority, aiming to become the global capital for crypto and Web3. In a period where the United States and Europe have tightened the noose around digital assets, Dubai has opened its arms. This follows their historical pattern, finding the friction in the global system and positioning themselves as the frictionless alternative. But is it sustainable? Critics argue that Dubai's tech push is often more about showcase projects than fundamental R&D. While you can see robot police officers and 3D printed buildings, the underlying academic and scientific infrastructure is still in its infancy compared to established hubs like Boston, London, or Shenzhen. Dubai is betting that if they provide the best playground and the lowest taxes, the world's greatest minds will eventually call the desert home. They're trying to build a digital fortress that is as tall as the Burj Khalifa, but as they move into this intangible realm, they face a new kind of threat, one that cannot be solved with concrete or gold. To understand the true mechanics of Dubai's wealth, we must look past the steel and glass to the people who actually assembled them. Dubai is the site of one of the most unique demographic experiments in modern history. In most nations, the people are the foundation of the state. In Dubai, the people are a precision-engineered resource. Approximately 90% of Dubai's population are expatriates. This creates a society that functions less like a traditional country and more like a high-performance corporation, where residency is tied strictly to economic utility. This is the human engine that powers the desert miracle. By importing nearly every level of labor, from the elite McKinsey consultants in the boardrooms to the millions of construction and service workers from South Asia and Africa, Dubai has created an incredibly flexible and scalable economy. When the economy booms, they can import hundreds of thousands of workers in months. When a crisis hits, like the 2008 crash or the global pandemic, the surplus labor can be exported back to their home countries, shielding the state from the long-term social welfare costs that often cripple Western economies. However, a neutral analysis must address the ethical and structural friction of this model. This efficiency comes at a significant human cost. The world has frequently scrutinized Dubai's kafala system, a sponsorship framework that historically gave employers immense power over their workers' legal status. While Dubai has introduced significant reforms in recent years to improve worker mobility and safety, the fundamental reality remains. The city is built on a massive divide. On one side, you have the knowledge class enjoying tax-free salaries and luxury lifestyles. On the other, you have the labor class living in industrial zones, sending the majority of their meager earnings home as remittances. This leads to a profound demographic paradox. Dubai has built a world-class civilization, yet it lacks a permanent multi-generational working class. There are very few poor Emiratis and very few rich workers who have a path to citizenship. This means that the vast majority of the people walking the streets of Dubai are temporary. They are there to build, to serve, or to invest, but rarely to stay forever. This creates a high-velocity culture of transience. It fuels a hustle economy where everyone is trying to make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible before their visa expires. But it also raises a haunting strategic question for the future. Can a city truly be great if it has no soul built on permanent roots? If a more attractive, lower tax, or higher tech city appears elsewhere, what stops the entire human engine from simply packing its bags and leaving? Dubai is betting that by constantly upgrading the product, the city itself, They can keep the world's talent on a perpetual subscription. But as we look toward the final chapter of this story, we see that the greatest challenge to Dubai's throne may not be internal, but external. For decades, Dubai enjoyed a monopoly of ambition. It was the only city in the region daring enough to dream of skyscrapers and global hubs. But that monopoly has ended. To the south, a sleeping giant has awakened. Saudi Arabia, with its Vision 2030 and the trillion-dollar NEOM project, is no longer just a neighbor. It is a direct existential competitor. The Saudis are not just copying the Dubai playbook. They're trying to outscale it, using a sovereign wealth fund that dwarfs Dubai's resources. If the region only needs one global gateway, what happens when a bigger, richer, and more resource-heavy player enters the field? This is the ultimate test for the Dubai model. Can a merchant state survive when its neighbors stop being customers and start being competitors? Dubai's response has been to double down on speed and integration. They are betting that their first-mover advantage, the decades spent building trust, legal frameworks, and lifestyle appeal, cannot be replicated by money alone. They are shifting from being a Middle East hub to a global platform, competing not just with Riyadh, but with Singapore, Hong Kong, and London. So, what is the final verdict? How did Dubai actually get rich? It wasn't just oil. Oil was merely the exit velocity that allowed them to escape the gravity of a desert economy. The true source of their wealth was a relentless, almost fanatical commitment to the logistics of flow. They mastered the art of removing friction in trade, friction in travel, and friction in capital. They realized that in a globalized world, the most valuable territory is not where the resources are, but where the paths cross. But we must conclude with a sobering truth. Dubai is a magnificent house of cards held together by the glue of global stability. Its wealth depends on the world remaining open, on the wealthy remaining mobile, and on the regional peace remaining intact. It is a city that must run at 200 miles per hour just to stay in place. If the music of global trade ever stops, or if the gray capital finds a safer harbor, the desert has a very long memory. Dubai is the world's most successful startup nation. Like any startup, it took massive risks, burned through enormous capital, and disrupted an entire industry. Whether it becomes a permanent superpower or remains a brilliant historical anomaly depends on one thing: its ability to evolve from a city that hosts the world's talent to a city that creates it. The oil is almost gone, the towers are built, and the ports are full. Now, Dubai's only remaining resource is the one they've been betting on since the very beginning: the audacity to believe that the impossible is simply a project that hasn't been funded yet.